Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, as I welcome you to another episode of the world of MMA with me, your host, Marley Dawkins, here at the MMA Gateway. We come out, we begin the show with the walkout music from the Soldier of God Romero, Soldado by Juan Luis Guerra. That Cuban vibe, you feel that, yeah? So, what are we discussing today? Thank you for joining me again. Today we're going to be discussing a variety of topics from the world of MMA. Obviously, what we're going to start with today is the fallout from the UFC 221, which happened this past weekend in Australia. We saw Yoel Romero defeat Luke Rockhold in the main event via KO punches at 1 minute 48 seconds of the third round. Whew! Now that was certainly a great main event to a good night of fights, and Yoel Romero is a special athlete. I mean, a lot of people would call him a freak athlete. I mean, the guy's 40 years old, but he looks like he's 25 or something, and he moves around like someone who's 25 as well. He's got some very unique genetics. And what he did in this fight is something that anyone who's followed his career has seen him do repeatedly. It's every fight he's had that he's won in the UFC has been like this. He has a specific strategy within his fights where he is attempting to lull his opponents to sleep. At the start of the fight, he will come out very slowly, very methodically. A lot of random movements to throw off his opponent, a lot of unorthodox techniques. I mean, you certainly won't see many fighters in a professional MMA fight pulling off a hammer fist to the leg, while you're standing. Yeah, I mean, it's that's the sort of things he was throwing in the early rounds. It was very methodical and slow. Luke Rockhold was landing some good jabs and was keeping his range reasonably well. However, towards the end of the second round, you could start to see that there was a flurry, I think, that happened, and Yoel Romero hurt Rockhold with a couple of punches in that flurry, and you could see it on Rockhold's face, and you could see it on Romero's faces. If you've seen as many fights as I have, guys, if you can see it at certain points in the fight when one fighter just says, "Oh shit, this guy is a lot better than I thought. I don't think I can beat this guy." And the other guy goes, "Oh shit, I've got this guy. He can't stop me. I'm going to finish this guy." And that is exactly what happened after. Like I say, I think it was towards the end of the second round. It may have been in the early third, but there was a flurry that landed, and you could see Rockhold got a little nick from it, and he was a little bit scared after that, understandably so. He was trying to keep his range well in the fight. I don't believe he used enough leg kicks and body kicks personally. However, I mean, he employed the technique he did, the strategy he did. But ultimately, as talented as Luke Rockhold is, he's been talked about as one of the best middleweights for years in terms of how rounded his game is, how big he is for the weight class. I mean, realistically, the guy could fight at 205, and he's talked about that as well. So he may go up in weight after this fight, but he has an issue in certain fights where his defense against overhand lefts and left hooks, it's an issue sometimes. That's how Michael Bisping caught him, and that's how Yoel Romero caught him for the end of this fight. It's just a simple 1-2, overhand left, landed, Rockhold dropped. He was trying to compose himself for half a second. Yoel Romero, though, he does not give you a chance. When he decides to turn it up, it's always late in the fight, around the third round, where he feels like he's analysed you enough, he's lulled you to sleep enough, he's distracted you enough, and now he's going to come at you with full power. And yeah, Rockhold tried to regain his composure for half a second. Romero didn't give him half a second at all. He was on him with his quick reactions and athleticism and landed a big shovel uppercut against the cage while Rockhold was sitting down. And that was enough for the referee to step in and call the fight. Some people complained about the stoppage. I had no issues with it whatsoever. If you think this was an early stoppage, you need to learn more about martial arts, bottom line. Okay, because that fight was over. If the referee had not stepped in when he did, all that would have happened would have Luke Rockhold would have taken unnecessary damage from Yoel Romero, and ultimately the referee is in there for fighter protection, for fighter safety. So it was a good stoppage from the referee. There was no more shots needed to be landed by Romero to finish that. That was done. And Rockhold, you could see it after the fight as well. He respects Romero. He respects that power now. He's been in there. He's tasted that. Romero, man, he is such an anomaly. Where does he go from here? I mean, you got to give him a rematch against Robert Whittaker. I mean, I just don't really see who else you would put against Yoel Romero. Romero's beaten everyone he's fought in the UFC, anyone who's not called Robert Whittaker. The Tim Kennedy fight was a little bit, that pissed off a lot of people, but he still won that fight in the end, ultimately late, as he tends to do in every fight. But the first fight with Whittaker was very competitive. I'd like to see that run back again, and who knows what could happen there. We could have Yoel Romero being the champion by the end of the year. For Luke Rockhold, I mean, it's tough. This is a really tough loss for him. This loss is probably an indicator for Luke Rockhold that he's possibly not going to get a title shot again anytime soon. Romero has laid waste to Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman, which a few years ago everyone thought Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman were the two that were going to dominate middleweight for majority of time in the future, but it's not panning out that way realistically. Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero are very clearly the two top fighters at middleweight, so you've got to make that rematch. For Luke Rockhold, as I'm saying though, it's a tricky one. You can give him more fights at middleweight, but realistically, like I say, he cuts a lot of weight. He's a really big dude for middleweight. Perhaps he can try 205. However, obviously there's the more when you go up in weight, there's also more power to deal with. Granted, not every 205er has power like Yoel Romero, but a lot of them do, and more. So, it's I don't know if that would be a great idea for Rockhold, but we'll see where he goes from here. If he continues to learn, then I'm sure that he will grow as a fighter and he'll come back stronger. However, he is at a point in his career where fighters can plateau at a certain point. And who knows, but Rockhold may have plateaued. We may have seen the best of Luke Rockhold already. So it may be a slow spiral downwards from here. Not likely. He could still dominate majority of middleweights, I would say. And he could probably dominate a lot of light heavyweights as well. But interesting fighter, never been short of confidence, but this will probably be a dent in that confidence, and we'll see if he can regain himself and come back stronger from here. In the co-main event, we had Curtis Blaydes defeating Mark Hunt. Man, this is a painful one, particularly for Australian fans, and I'm not even Australian, but I've been watching MMA since I was a kid, and I've seen all of Mark Hunt's fights, and he's a legend. The guy has never taken an easy fight. He has been fighting killers from the beginning of his career, which is why his record reflects that. He has taken a lot of losses, but he's never tried to pad his record out. He's always taken the toughest fights at heavyweight. This was no different. This is a young lion versus an old lion type of fight. I always like these type of fights. They're very defining fights for people's careers. There's a lot for both fighters to learn in these type of fights. Early on in the fight, it really looked like Mark Hunt was going to roll back the years to some vintage Mark Hunt and get an early walk-away knockout, because he hit Curtis Blaydes a couple of times and he absolutely rocked him really badly. Curtis Blaydes was wobbling around the octagon. Everyone, all the Australian fans were getting excited. We were all thinking, okay, this is Curtis Blades is going to get knocked out by Mark Hunt here. And what did Curtis Blades do? He did what all great martial artists do when they face adversity in a fight, which is adjust. And the adjustment sometimes will be something of just adjusting to what is natural to you as a martial artist. And what is natural to you is what you will have done the most in your life. Curtis Blades has done more wrestling than any other martial art in his life. It's natural for him. So when he got hit by Mark Hunt, you could just see it on his face, like, oh shit, no, I don't want any more of this. Let me grab this guy and throw him to the ground, and then I can control this fight. That's exactly what he did. It was textbook. Some really beautiful variety of takedowns he was displaying, and some real incredible strength to go with that wrestling. I mean, single legs, double legs, suplexes, high crotches, little sweeps and trips and drags. He was pulling out a full variety of takedowns here and really wearing on Mark Hunt. And it's a grueling loss for Mark Hunt. Unanimous decision win for Curtis Blades, the biggest win of Curtis Blades' career. He's ready now. He's a young, talented heavyweight. He's ready to take on the top 5 at heavyweight, I believe. Who does he fight next? I think a rematch with Francis Ngannou would be great. I really do. It was competitive the first time round. Francis Ngannou could not knock out Curtis Blades, and the fight was stopped based on a doctor stoppage, which is always not a definitive ending to a fight. So I'm sure Curtis Blades would like to get that one back. Francis Ngannou probably wouldn't necessarily want to fight Curtis Blades, being as he's the number 1 contender. However, I think for Francis as well, this would probably be a fight he could do with. He needs to improve his wrestling. We all saw how he was exposed against Stipe Miocic. And if he were to have a rematch with Curtis Blades, he would have to. He would be forced to focus on his wrestling defense, which would only improve him as a martial artist. So that's what I'd like to see from Curtis Blades, but you could put him against anyone in the top 5, and I believe he'll be competitive with that phenomenal wrestling capability that he's got. Mark Hunt, look, I mean, he's towards the end of his career. We can all admit it. He said himself he wants to keep fighting. He's still enjoying it, and I'm still happy to see him fighting. However, in recent years, he has taken some hard losses, some hard knockouts, and I don't want to see him going in there, getting hurt a lot moving forward from here. So I'm sure training partners and family members and friends close to him and things will mention when everyone's concerned. I'm sure he's got some more fights in him, but but I think maybe 2-3 years tops is what we could expect more from Mark Hunt. That could be being generous as well, realistically speaking. So we'll see where Mark Hunt goes from here, but he's always entertaining against anyone and an absolute legend of the sport. Before that, we had Tai Tuivasa defeating Cyril Asker at 2 minutes 18 of round 1. Tai Tuivasa, who's Mark Hunt's protege, pretty much. So when Mark Hunt has retired, Tai Tuivasa will be that guy. He has been one of Mark Hunt's main training partners for years. He's very young, talented heavyweight who hits hard, and he displayed that again in this fight. Just absolutely blitzed Cyril Asker here. Cyril Asker showed a great chin. He must have taken between 100 and 200 strikes before the fight was stopped. And it wasn't actually a punch that stopped him either. It was he was just wobbly on his feet from taking so many punches against the cage. And there was a little half clinch second moment, and Tuivasa just got a little underhook and just threw Asker down to the ground. And Asker's legs just couldn't stay up. He face planted into the floor, and referee, good stoppage there. Tai Tuivasa, exciting young heavyweight. Like I say, it'll be very interesting to see where he goes from here. A slow build, though. I don't think we need to rush him too much. So just give him some fights that he can build his confidence and his martial arts prowess off. Cyril Asker, he's an experienced veteran, experienced French fighter, and I'm sure he'll learn from this loss, and we'll we'll see if he comes back stronger. Before that, we had Jake Matthews defeating Li Jingliang, by unanimous decision. Jake Matthews making his debut at 170 here, looking really, really good at welterweight. I don't know how the guy made 155 originally. He's a big 170 now. And he really, really just was showing great maturity in his performance. Staying very calm, landing his shots, moving well, circling well. He showed some very good proficiency on the feet here against an opponent in Li Jingliang, who is an excellent boxer on the feet. And Jay Matthews pretty much picked him apart here in this fight. Landed some really hard single shots and 1-2s, and Li Jingliang's got a chin on him. We've seen that in this fight. We've seen that before, but there was a moment as well which really left a bad taste for some people, probably the judges, some as well, and all the fans that were watching. Jake Matthews went for a guillotine at one point, and I don't know how, but there was a cut that Jake Matthews opened up on his forehead here. And when Jake Matthews had Li Jingliang in the guillotine, he was just getting the hooks in, and he was cinching it in fully. It was really interesting because Li Jingliang was just very smart. He just could feel the choke cinching in, and he just started poking his fingers into the cut of Jake Matthews to force Jake Matthews to release the choke. In a street fight, that's something you would say is acceptable. But in MMA, in the octagon, this is with referees and judges, and it's an officiated competition. You can't do things like that. That is what you call bad sportsmanship. That's trying to cheat, essentially. So that wasn't a great look for Li Jingliang. But he got pretty thoroughly defeated here. Jake Matthews, fascinating to see where he goes from here. The kid's really talented. So give him a slow build, and we'll see where he goes from here. Li Jingliang, he's still pretty much the top fighter in China. So, you can put him in there against pretty much anyone. And I'll be interested to see it, ultimately. Before that, we had Tyson Pedro defeating Saparek Safarov by Kimura in the first round. Beautiful Kimura. Tyson Pedro, another talented fighter from Australia. Australian MMA is really coming a long way now. And Tyson Pedro's got a very solid submission game, and he's some good new blood at 205, which is needed. So again, a slow build for him off this, and we could see him doing some great things in the future in the UFC. Saparek Safarov, who knows where he goes from here. On the undercard, I'll just whiz through these quickly. We had Dong Young Kim defeating Damian Brown via split decision. We had Israel Adesanya defeating Rob Wilkinson. Israel Adesanya, very interesting guy. A lot of correlations to John Jones. Very interesting story. Talks well on the microphone. We'll see where he goes from here, because he could be a very exciting talent that I certainly want to see him again. Rob Wilkinson, he'll go back to the drawing board. We'll see where he goes from here. Before that, we had Alexander Volkanovski defeating Jeremy Kennedy. Volkanovski has obviously for a long time been one of the top fighters in Australia. He's just showed that again here, doing what he does. Very much a Randy Couture style of fighting. He'll cage grind you. He'll find ways to trip you and drag you to the ground, and he'll just stay heavy with his top control and just land punches and elbows. From half guard or from guard or from mount, whatever, wherever he is, he's going to just land shots on the ground and stay heavy on you. And he did that again and got the win here. So we'll see where he goes from here. Perhaps he's ready for a lifting competition. I would say it's right in his career for that now. Before that, we had Hussier Formiga defeating Ben Wynn by rear naked choke in round 3. Beautiful performance from Hussier Formiga. He really landed some great shots on Ben Wynn. His striking seems to have come a long, long way. And I believe he's, if you talk about someone who can give DJ a challenge right now, I think Hussier Formiga could do that. Personal friend of mine, someone I've chatted to many times on Twitter. he's just, his striking, like I say, has come a long way to go with his incredible jiu-jitsu technique. So yeah, just give him someone in the top 5 always, someone around where he is in rankings. These fights occasionally for him against a young up-and-comer, but Husier Formiga's too good for guys like this. Ben Nguyen, he's a good young talented fighter, but this was always going to be too much for him from my perspective before the fight, and it looked like that really for majority of the fight in the cage. And I can't remember if it was a kick. I think it was a head kick, or it was a big strike that was landed. Anyway, he dropped Ben Nguyen, landed a few more shots on the ground, got the rear naked choke in. Beautiful performance from Formiga. We'll see where he goes from here. Ben Nguyen, more learning to do. I'm sure he'll improve and grow from this performance. Before that, we had Ross Pearson defeating Mizuto Hirota via unanimous decision. Good to see Ross Pearson getting a win after 4 straight losses, I believe it was. So that's great for him. Before that, we had Jose Quinones defeating Teruto Ishihara. Quinones, one of the talented prospects from Mexico, looking good. Ishihara, I mean, he's talented, one of many talented Japanese fighters, but I'm not sure. I don't know if he's focused enough in his training. Sometimes he seems to be more focused on women than training. I mean, fine, of course. Majority of men in the world do love women, of course, but when you're in the cage, when you're in a martial arts bout, I mean, I'm not sure at times if he's focused enough. So maybe that's something he needs to learn on, more a psychological aspect, because he's got a lot of talent, a very good striker, and he could go a long way if he learns from this loss and continues to develop. So we'll see where both men go from here, but both good prospects. And then in the opener, we had Luke Jumo defeating Daichi Abe via unanimous decision. So that was just a brief rundown of the card, guys. I really enjoyed the fights. Great fight. Again, seeing Yoel Romero is always a unique thing to see. The card on the whole was a very good card. I enjoyed it a lot. So I'd just like to have a chat about some other things as well now, guys. So now I want to talk about Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. We all saw this boxing match back in August last year. One of the biggest events in combat sports history, of course. And ever since the fight ended, a lot of people were wondering if Floyd Mayweather was going to maybe fight in MMA, and would that happen, and things like that. So I didn't really believe it for a while, but recently it's becoming quite solid. The gossip about that, you could say. Floyd Mayweather is genuinely thinking about fighting in MMA, just once or twice at the end of his career for big paydays. Now, putting him in there against someone like Conor McGregor, a 2-time UFC champion, that's not going to be a good idea for his first MMA fight. Conor would chew him up pretty easily, I think. Leg kicks on the outside, all kinds of kicks. He'd probably throw him around in the clinch. I don't think Floyd could get close enough to use his boxing techniques, a lot of them. So I don't think that fight would be a good idea for Floyd. However, there has been discussions of Floyd Mayweather fighting against CM Punk in his UFC debut. Yeah, that moment of silence thing, guys, that's kind of what all MMA purist fans will be doing when they hear that news. Look, this is the UFC. This is the Ultimate Fighting Championships. This is mixed martial arts. I want to see the best martial artists compete against each other. I want to see them express their technique against each other and see who is more effective in real life action. I'm not interested in who can talk the best, who draws the most pay-per-views, who's got the biggest celebrity name, who can talk the most shit. I'm not interested. But I understand for the UFC owners, especially the new UFC owners, WME, IMG, they run Hollywood pretty much. So it's kind of, it was always going to be more celebrity marquee fights happening moving forward. I don't mind if they do this, a couple of times a year. Yeah, of course, to boost the profit margins, you've got to do it. You're running a business. You need those ticket sales, those pay-per-view buys. So we could see CM Punk versus Floyd Mayweather in the UFC, and it probably would sell more pay-per-views than any MMA event ever. So we'll see what happens there. It's going to be a bit of a sideshow. As long as we don't start seeing whole cards of, Brad Pitt versus Mark Wahlberg and, Charlize Theron versus Lady Gaga. I don't want to see, it turn into Ultimate Sideshow Championship. Okay, so as long as it's just occasionally, I don't mind it, because it will be exciting. It'll be interesting to see Floyd Mayweather against anyone in MMA. It'll just be interesting to see. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, right here at the MMA Gateway, guys, we'll keep you informed on any information that comes our way about that. So that's that. Also, just want to have a quick look at some of the up-and-coming cards we've got to look forward to. We have got, this coming weekend, we've got Bellator 194, Nelson versus Mitrione in the heavyweight tournament, the continuation. So, yeah, great to see Roy Nelson and Matt Mitrione, experienced UFC veterans. Both can hit really hard, big heavyweights. That's going to be fascinating. Then we've got Patricky Pitbull fighting as well against Derek Campos. We've got Heather Hardy against Anna Julaton. We've got Liam McGeary versus Vadim Nemkov. So some good fights on this card, Bellator always doing the best they can to compete with the UFC, of course. We've also, on Sunday, the February the 18th, we've got UFC Fight Night Cerrone versus Medeiros. So Donald Cerrone versus Yancy Medeiros. I'm not sure where Donald Cerrone's head is at, really, at the moment in terms of MMA and his training, and where his career is going from here. So I favour Yancy Medeiros there, definitely. But we'll see what happens. Some other good fights on the card as well. We've got Derek Lewis versus Marcin Tybura. Some big heavyweights in action. Derek Lewis, guy hits really hard, and Marcin Tybura, good all-rounder. So that'll be an interesting fight. James Vick versus Francisco Trinaldo. Fascinating. Young lion, old lion. I always love those type of fights. So that will be a good one to see. Thiago Alves in action. Sage Northcutt. There's some good fights on this card. So that will be a good one to see as well. Then the following weekend, February 24th, we've got Josh Emmett versus Jeremy Stevens. That would be a great fight to see as well. Then on March 2nd, we've got Bellator 195, Darian Caldwell versus Leandro Higo. March 3rd, we've got a big one, UFC 222, Chris Cyborg versus Yana Kunitskaya in the new main event with Frankie Edgar and Brian Ortega as the co-main. I was originally really interested to see Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway. This had to be rescheduled. Brian Ortega's come in. Brian Ortega, one of the top talents at 145 pounds, one of the best submission games, great killer instinct. And he's going to have the size advantage here on Frankie Edgar. But Frankie, he's got that veteran experience, so he'll have the experience edge, and he'll definitely have a wrestling edge, I feel, as well. So that will be a fascinating fight to see. There's, you've also got Stefan Struve, Andrei Arlovsky, Kat Zingane versus Caitlin Vieira, Sean O'Malley versus Andrei Sukumtar. There's a lot of interesting fights here, guys. So a lot to look forward to. Of course, we'll cover everything right here at the MMA Gateway. But that's going to be all for today, guys. So thank you very much for joining me for another episode. Make sure you like this video. That's the thumbs up. Subscribe, share the video. And of course, stay tuned for more from the world of MMA right here at the MMA Gateway. Stay cool, guys.